Hello everybody, welcome to the Art by Line channel. Today we're doing a color with me of Howl's Moving Castle, and we're doing that today on a Traveler's Notebook dot grid insert. So here's a look at that insert and the supplies that we'll be using today. We have a 003 micron, a 01 micron, a white jelly roll gel pen, and some Copic markers. I forgot the N2, but we have here the N8, N6, and N4, along with BG57 Jasper. There's a look at that inside of that Traveler's Notebook insert. And here we're getting into it. So this paper has a slight gray tone to it, so it was a lot of fun to build up those gray tones and add some white highlights with that gel pen. You'll be seeing throughout this piece I'll be tilting that Traveler's Notebook insert, and I'm just trying to find the best angle for the range of motion of my wrist there. So whenever you're inking or coloring, it's always best to try and put your piece at an angle that you can color things effectively. So I apologize if throughout the video it's a little hard to keep track of what I'm doing. But Howl's Moving Castle is probably one of my favorite movies. I think it's definitely my favorite Studio Ghibli movie, of which Hayao Miyazaki is the creator, and he's an interesting character himself for a lot of reasons. But one thing is, he personally looks at just about every single frame of every single movie he produces, which is an unbelievable amount of work. And also his team tends to animate the stories before they set the plot and dialogue to what they've created, which I find really fascinating. Now I just know that from a little pre-roll about Hayao Miyazaki's process that was played before. I saw Princess Mononoke at a local theater, which was a fantastic time, and if you ever have the opportunity to see a Studio Ghibli film on the big screen, or just a bigger screen like that local theater, I highly recommend it. It's such a fantastic experience. Now I found this picture of Howl's Moving Castle very hard to sketch out. The proportions of the quote-unquote face of the castle is not exactly what you would expect. I think it's a little misleading. As you can see on the right side, that kind of paneling continues on, which isn't really readily apparent when you're first looking at it. So it did take me a few attempts to get that where I wanted it. But past that, all the details were a lot of fun. I really like doing detail work like that. I love the thin little lines that you get with a 003 micron. Microns in general are fantastic, as well as Copic markers. For me, I think decorating the covers of the inserts in a Traveler's Notebook is one of my favorite parts. I think setting up a new Traveler's Notebook is super exciting. I wish it continued to be that exciting for, the life of all of the inserts inside of it. Unfortunately, nothing is quite the same after a Traveler's Notebook is set up for me. So I'm, hoping to find new ways to use the inside of all of these inserts that will keep them fresh and interesting for me. That's something that really excites me about the watercolor inserts. I can't remember if they used to have those available. I don't remember them, but maybe I just missed them. But I think being able to, make this a travel watercolor kit with some, other smaller paint sets will help the longevity of this for me. As well as I'm hoping to kind of get into doing some, art journaling and some kind of bullet journal style spreads inside here, so hopefully all of that helps. I definitely want to keep creative all the time and not just want to get something new. Now Now, an interesting thing about Howl's Moving Castle is, unlike I think any other of his films, it was based on a book by Diana Jones. And I've heard from friends who have read it, I have not personally read it myself, that the book is horribly boring. Again, I don't know, that's just what I've heard. So it's interesting that they took this concept and really morphed it into something entertaining and enjoyable. Because again, I've heard that the book's plot and characters were vastly different from what we got from Hayao Miyazaki in his adaptation. I think the themes of beauty and self-acceptance really appeal to me as well. For the two main characters, you have Howl and Sophie. And Howl is a wizard who, puts a lot of time and energy into his appearance, mixing potions to dye his hair and such, and is very arrogant about the fact that he is a handsome young man. Whereas Sophie is cursed to look like an old woman by a witch, and therefore has a very negative view of her appearance and how others perceive her. And throughout the movie, I think it's really genius that in her moments of self-realization where she accepts herself, she is depicted again as a young woman. And there's no moment of the movie in which her curse is specifically broken by anything. It's just that she comes to accept herself as she is and to see herself as a confident, beautiful young woman, and that's what sets her free. And that's when she reverts back to her original appearance, except for the addition of, light gray, white hair that's later cut. And, she does look beautiful at the end. She always did, of course, but she seems more herself. Because at the beginning of the film, she has this braided brown hair and she's always tucking herself away under an ugly hat. And she doesn't have any confidence that she can create her own future or plan her life out. She's stuck in the hattery making hats just because she feels obligated to. Even though her sister tells her that she can have more for herself, she seems to only, bow to people's expectations. It really takes the whole length of the movie for her to start showing initiative, and by the end she's making decisions completely on her own. And even then, it does start at the beginning when she notices that she's cursed and old. She proactively decides to leave her house and, home and figure out how to become herself again, and that propels the entire narrative. Sophie isn't the only one that shows remarkable growth throughout the course of the film. Howl also does. He starts out, again, kind of as a philanderizing womanizer, it's depicted, where he's, trying to date beautiful women like he thinks the Witch of the Waste is. And then, when he finds out that they're not all they're cracked up to be, he runs away. But by the end, he gives up being a coward and stops having this overly inflated sense of self and learns to put someone else ahead of him, and he learns to prioritize Sophie's needs. By the end of the movie, potentially giving up his own life so that she can be safe. I think that contrast of initial perspective is what makes the film really great. It doesn't really matter if you're a Howl or if you think you're more of a Sophie. The film still has something to say to you about, how you value yourself, whether that's too high or too low, and how that affects your relationships with other people. For Howl, that's from going to having no secure attachments and running away from people once he doesn't find a use in them, to forming a quirky little family unit with Calcifer, Markle, the Witch of the Waste, and their dog. And for Sophie, she goes from a pretty toxic family situation where she was just being used as an extra pair of hands and is later, manipulated and tricked by her mother to, a living situation in which she's valued and certainly has a lot more initiative. So those are the reasons for me that this film really matters a lot to me. I still come back to it and enjoy it year after year. So if you haven't seen it, what are you doing? You need to go watch it. Definitely. It's worth your time. So now that I'm feeling pretty happy about where the castle is at, I'm taking that BG57 Jasper Copic marker and I'm going around and adding that tealish color, avoiding the tops of the mountain and the side where I'm going to put lines around this to kind of give it a nice little frame. But this is a tip that I learned about a long time ago to kind of color block around just a plain gray tone or just, black cross-hatched drawing to kind of make it pop. I really enjoyed this, and I love doing it for Inktober sketches where you just have the clean black cross-hatching on the actual drawing, and then you just pop a shape around it like a circle or a rectangle or a triangle and fill that in with a color, and again that just helps the drawing to pop from the background, and it's a very quick and easy way of doing that. Now as I'm laying down that color on the left side, you'll see that it's not blending in completely. So there's a few things that you can do to help prevent that. So when you're laying Copic marker down, it's best to, instead of doing lines, work it in a circular motion. That helps blend in, what you laid down first with what is coming, second. It would also have helped to go over it again probably. The only problem with that is that Copic marker does build on itself, so if you go over something again after the initial layer has dried, you are going to get a darker color. And again, if you're not, blending that properly on that layer, you're still going to have the same problem. So it's a little bit of a dilemma. I always find that Copic marker tends to be a bit difficult in those wider swatches of area, so I really like it for smaller details. Now I've just added in the impression of mountains off screen. Nothing too fancy. I don't want to take away from the focal point that is the castle, so I didn't go too detailed in on those mountains, but now we're just taking a ruler and a larger micron. This might be a 0.8, and going around and adding black lines around that rectangle. So now we are about done with this insert. So that's about 1 out of 3 down, I believe. So thanks for joining me on this one. I hope you'll join me on the next ones too. Thank you guys. Have a great day.